Hey everyone, happy Thanksgiving. Here are your starts and sits for week 13. We'll start off at the quarterback position. I'm going to play Bo Nix this week, and I know he struggled over his last couple of games before the bye week, but he's got a really good matchup this week against the Commanders. Their defense has allowed 8 quarterbacks to beat them for 18 plus points on the season, including 5 who fit that mark since week 6. So start Bo Nix and start Jacoby Brissett. I mean, he has been phenomenal. I mean, look at the numbers. Over 18 fantasy points in every single start he's made with the Cardinals. I like the matchup against the Buccaneers too. They've allowed 18 plus fantasy points to 3 different quarterbacks since week 10. So yes, Jacoby Brissett is a stardom. Among the quarterbacks I'm sitting, Daniel Jones. This is the second straight week. He hasn't scored 17 points in 3 straight games, and he's got a bad matchup against Houston. Their defense has allowed fewer than 14 fantasy points to all but 3 quarterbacks, and that includes holding Josh Allen to just 8.1 points last week. So Daniel Jones is a risk, and so is Caleb Williams on Friday, the Black Friday game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Their defense has allowed just 1 quarterback to beat them for more than 17.9 points in Philadelphia. So I'd beware Caleb Williams in that tough NFC matchup. At the running back position, I'm sticking with Treveyon Henderson. And I know last week the numbers weren't great, 11.1 fantasy points, but he still started. He saw 40% of the touches, and I like the matchup against the Giants. They've allowed 25 plus fantasy points to 5 running backs since week 8. And I'm also going to stick with Breece Hall. His numbers have not been great lately. 22.3 points in his last 2 games. It's not bad, but he's still getting a good workload. And look at this matchup against Atlanta. Over the last 4 weeks, their defense has allowed 4.7 yards per rush and the 7th most points per game, the running back. So I'm going to stick with Breece Hall. Among the running backs, I'm fading or at least tempering expectations. And I know this is crazy because I'm wearing a Cowboys jersey, but Javonte Williams, he's averaged 27.7 fantasy points per game in his first 5 games. Since then, 12.5 points per game. And he's been held to 10.3 or fewer points in 3 of those games. And listen, this is a bad matchup against the Chiefs. They just held Jonathan Taylor to 8.6 points. So I know you probably have to play Javonte Williams, but temper your expectations. And I don't love DeAndre Swift. I told you not to play him last week. He had a 1.9 points. He continues to lose work to Kyle Monengai, who last week had more snaps and more touches. Also, not a great matchup against the Eagles. Even though it's a revenge game, I'm going to fade DeAndre Swift. At wide receiver, I love Jaylen Waddle this week. Now, before the bye, he had 8.2 points. It wasn't great, but he had scored 14 plus points in each of his previous 3 games. And he's got a good matchup this week against the Saints. Their defense has allowed the 2nd most points per game to perimeter receivers in the last 4 weeks. So Jaylen Waddle should bounce back. I also like A.J. Brown this week. And listen, A.J. Brown was a guy who has been up and down all season long. Last week had a very good game, and he's been better lately. You also got to look at this matchup against Chicago. They've surrendered the 7th most points per game to perimeter receivers over the last 4 weeks. So I am sticking with A.J. Brown, who I think could get hot here for fantasy managers. Next up, I'm sitting Michael Pittman Jr., and I know he is a very difficult player to sit. He's been averaging right around 15 points per game, but the Texans' defense is just nasty good. They've allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to perimeter receivers, and Pittman has scored fewer than 7.5 points against them in 3 straight games. So I'd beware Michael Pittman Jr., and I'd also beware Deebo Samuel Sr. Now, he put up a nice stat line in the week before Washington's bye. He had almost 21 points. But he had been held to single digits in 3 of his previous 4 games, and a matchup against the Broncos is just not good. Their defense has allowed just 2 touchdowns and the 2nd fewest points per game to wide receivers this season. So beware Deebo Samuel. Among the tight ends I'm playing, Mark Andrews. And listen, last week he had a stinker. I get it. Only 2.1 points. But he's got the Bengals this week. You know what happens? Death, taxes, and the Bengals defense is going to give up a big total to a tight end. Those are guaranteed things in life. Look at the numbers. 10 different tight ends has beaten Cincinnati for double digits, including 4 who've gone over 20 points since week 5. So Mark Andrews is a very good play. And so is Juwan Johnson. He just continues to put up good numbers. 10.6 points last week. He scored double digits in 5 straight games. And now he's got the Dolphins this week. They've allowed 10 plus fantasy points to 7 tight ends. And in all, their defense is giving up the 4th most points per game to tight ends. Start Juwan Johnson. I'm going to sit TJ Hockenson once again. And listen, the numbers have not been great, and it's not because of him. The quarterback play in Minnesota has been brutal. So whether it's J.J. McCarthy this week or Max Brosmer, it doesn't matter. Hockenson's a guy I just simply can't play, and the matchup against Seattle clearly is not good. And I'm also going to fade Colston Loveland on Friday against the Eagles. Now, he scored a touchdown last week, and he scored 9+ points in 3 of his last 4 games. But the Eagles' defense has allowed the second fewest points per game to tight ends. In fact, only one tight end has beaten Philadelphia for more than 11.1 points this season. So I'd fade Colston Loveland.